Good morning, AstriCon! Thank you and welcome to the final day of AstriCon 2015. And now, with no further ado, Mr. David Duffett.
Good morning. Hey, I was wondering just how many people have made use of the theme park facilities and been into the theme park. Yes, a few. Well, special good morning to you. We've got a great day lined up for you. And as you know already, you know this because you were here yesterday, we have a great AstriCon on our hands, right? We do. We've had some great talks already. Now, I told you yesterday this was a historic AstriCon because we've got the free PBX track, we've got Alison in the kissing booth, we've got 3 keynotes. Well, it's historic for another reason, a slightly more dubious reason. It's the first ever AstriCon where the fastest dude competition has suffered a very minor technical hitch. So, what we've had to do is we've had to pull the fastest dude competition. Every single person that stepped up to take part has a free ticket to AstriCon next year, worth several $100s. But here's the exciting part. We're going to put the fastest dude contest online after AstriCon, so everybody will be able to have a go, and then after a certain time, we'll give out the prizes. Does that sound okay? Yeah, that sounds okay. I wanted to give you a note about parking as well. Everybody here gets free parking, whether you're staying in the hotel or not. So if you're just driving up each day, you also get free parking. And the way to avail yourselves of that is to go to the registration desk, and they will give you a little white ticket to do that. I just wanted to share a thought with you as well. You know, sometimes you think of those sort of what-if thoughts. I was thinking the other day, I was remembering, as well as doing the community work for Digium, I also teach Asterisk classes, and I had the pleasure of delivering an Asterisk advanced class in Kingston, Jamaica a few years ago, and I was reminiscing about that and about what happened there, and a thought came to me that if Bob Marley, the well-known reggae star, if he'd been into VoIP, you know, and particularly into SIP, his seminal work, No Woman, No Cry, you know, when you think about SDP and things like that, it may have been called No Codec, No Call. You can see how that fits, can't you? Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. It's one of those things that came to me. But that's not why I'm here. The reason I'm here is to introduce the man that started it all. I'll waste no further time and say welcome to the stage, Mark Spencer.
Good morning, everybody. How are you guys all enjoying AstriCon so far? I mean, it's already kind of coming to an end. It's pretty hard to imagine. I mean, it feels like it only started a couple of days ago. Well, I guess it did start a couple of days ago. But how many of you guys and ladies have a business that is built on Asterisk or work for a business built on Asterisk? That's pretty cool. You know, most CEOs of companies measure their success either by what they're making or what kind of a return they're delivering to shareholders or how much money their companies are making. But Digium's a little bit unique because the way we measure our success is by all of you guys that now have businesses out there that are not only, you know, you guys have jobs that are keep them employed but all the solutions that you're bringing to your customers that are bringing new value that was literally unimaginable 10, 15 years ago before all this stuff started. And that's really pretty powerful, and it requires a very powerful person to be able to manage that relationship. When Digium started to get pretty big, and around 2006, 2007, I realized that I needed help. I really didn't know anything about running a company of that size. And back then, they kind of referred to us as a daycare in the building. And so I made a kind of an offhanded comment to our investor while we were looking for people to help us. And I said, you know, it's just too bad we couldn't get Danny, who was on our board but worked for EdTran at the time, to come over. And so David went and kind of took Danny to dinner and courted him over to come to Digium, and that has been one of the most positive steps in the history of the company, and I think we all need to be very thankful for Danny and his leadership and how he has managed to keep the value of Asterisk out there for all the customers and for all of you guys as integrators to be able to make great products, technology, and just great stuff for people out there, many of whom probably don't even know what Asterisk is. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Danny Windham, CEO of Digium.
Thanks, Mark. It is true that I was brought to Digium to be the adult supervision. I would like to think that we still are kids at heart about what we do, though. It is really a pleasure for me to be here today. I want to thank Mark, but I want to thank all of you for attending AstriCon 2015, and a special shout out to those of you who are sponsor organizations. This event wouldn't be what it is without you. And it's quite an honor for me to do this. Even though I've been CEO of Digium for 8 years, I've never been asked to do a keynote at AstriCon. We might learn today why that's the case. But for those of you who said, that's not true, I saw you do a keynote once before, that happened to be the year that the person we really wanted to do the keynote got stuck in an airport somewhere and couldn't get there, so I had to fill in at the very last minute. Now, I saw David take a poll yesterday and ask how many of you are here at AstriCon for the first time. And I clearly have a lot of things I want to talk about today, but I want to have a chance to learn some from you as well in this presentation. And the first thing I would like to ask you is, if you are here primarily because your organization is an end user of Asterisk, we're going to get a show of hands, or if you are here primarily because you are a reseller or systems integrator of communications products or services, or you have built a business off of Asterisk, show of hands. So those of you who are here primarily as end users, show of hands. And then the other category. All right, I'm going to say that was 60-40 or so. 60% people built on Asterisk and 40% end users. So I don't know how it works in your company, but our company lives and dies on our ability to communicate effectively and reliably with our customers. I assume it's the case for you. And part of my job as CEO of Digium is to try to anticipate where things are going to go in the future, because we want to position our company to be able to take advantage of those changes in the industry, and I presume you do too. And I enjoy coming to AstriCon and hearing the keynote speakers. AstriCon is pretty much a geek fest, so traditionally we wind up talking about communications products technology. What's the underlying architecture? What's the latest protocols? How are we changing the way we build communications products and services? And when I try to think about where things are going in the future, I have been wondering if 10 years from now, communications will be a thing. So communications is clearly a big thing in our company because it is the lifeblood of how we interact with our customers. But the question I want to ask today is, 10 years from now, will communications still be a thing or not be a thing? Now, you heard Bill Wignall talk yesterday about things moving so much faster, and I have to admit, anytime I hear someone doing a presentation about what's going to happen in the future, I'm immediately cynical, because half the time the person talking doesn't seem like they know what the hell they're talking about, and you'll have to conclude if that's the case here today or not. And half the time it seems like they have some ulterior motive about why they're saying what they're saying, and you'll have to figure out if you think that's the case or not. But in general, I'm skeptical because this is just hard. The pace of change and the way things accelerate today, things move so much more quickly. It used to be that you could recognize a trend, and if you had some gut feel of whether that trend might extend or not, you could figure that out. But if you look at how things are adopted, it took 70 years for a phone, how they're adopted in the communication space. It took 70 years for phones to reach 80% penetration in the US. It took 15 years for a cell phone to do the same thing. And you heard Bill say yesterday, even though it's not specifically addressed to our industry, Angry Birds took 37 days to get 50 million users. Wonder how many they have today. And so when things move so quickly, it's easy to be wrong, and I'll be the first to admit, these are just my opinions. And it's also interesting to be talking about change in an industry that has traditionally moved so slowly. And now maybe you've not been around long enough to remember that this has been a industry that has been slow to innovate, and possibly you're put off by a comment like that because you think that's not the case today. But let's kind of look back for the last 100 years and at least get the perspective of how things have changed. So if you go back 100 years ago, maybe this photo is possibly representative of a business person and a business phone. This was about the time of the first transcontinental phone call. And if you'll fast forward to 1950, go, whoop. Then this is maybe representative of what a business person and a business phone would have looked like. And the innovation that occurred in the 35 years between those 2 points is you no longer had to tell the person what number you wanted to dial, you could actually dial it yourself. Move forward to 1970 or so. This is about the time touch-tone service went into effect, and this picture maybe is representative. And the innovation that happened in the 20 years that transpired there is the rotary dial got replaced with buttons. Move forward another 20 years. This is about the time of the divestiture of AT&T, the creation of Baby Bells, maybe a representative photo there. The innovation was we went from a few buttons to a lot of buttons. Now, by 2010, things really kind of began to accelerate the pace of change. In fact, by 2010, many of us had converted our desk to some sort of a communication shrine. We had like a multi-button desk phone and maybe a fax machine and scanner, possibly a printer, a computer monitor or two. It looked like it was the more the merrier. But what happened in that time frame were some very significant things happened, and the pace of innovation began to change. Now, what were those things? Well, why is it that this industry did not innovate for dozens of years? I contend it was just the lack of competition. In 1968, there was a legal ruling called the Carter Phone decision, which said it was okay for somebody other than AT&T to build a device to plug into the public switch telephone network, and that created competition at the device level. In the early 90s, AT&T was divested. It created competition at the service provider level, and that created an environment where all of a sudden an industry that wasn't innovating in the past was now innovating because there were competitors in the market. And I would even suggest that the introduction of Asterisk around 2000 or so created an environment for innovation in this industry because it allowed people like you to start building communications products and services. That job in the past had been relegated to really big companies who pretty much suck at innovation. So even though things are now moving much more quickly in this industry, it's interesting that the way we utilize our communications products and services really hasn't changed in almost 100 years. All right, this has officially stopped. We all have business applications that we use to run our companies, and that will vary based upon what industry you're in and how aggressively you invest in your IT infrastructure. It includes things like CRM systems and ERP systems, productivity suites, communication solutions, but in general, there is very little interaction today between all of those different applications. They are their own thing. Communications is its own thing. And what I'd like to talk about today is, will that be the case in the future? What does the future thing look like? Well, one, my premise is communications is going to move from being a thing to being not a thing. But before you panic, the fact that communications might not be a thing is not going to be a bad thing. It might be a good thing. You know, in trying to understand how things are going to change in the future, I think it's very helpful to try to understand why things changed in the past and then apply those same principles in looking forward to see if you can, be better at predicting the future. And in looking at this industry and looking at most industries, my contention is things really only change for one reason, and it all revolves around money. We might look at it, particularly in a group that's as technical as this group is, and want to believe that technology is the reason things change. And to some degree, technology certainly is a change enabler. But I also believe that the only true brand of technology that results in change is technology that enables a lower cost way of doing business. So let's see if that holds on some of the biggest innovations in this industry over the last few years. And when I started my career in this industry, which let's just say was a long time ago, the state of the art at the time I came into the industry was communication systems were essentially very large PBX systems, and they were connected using TDM, time division multiplex networks. So essentially there was a network for carrying voice, and then this growing network for carrying data. Voice over IP has clearly been a major shift in this industry in the last 25 years, but it didn't really gain momentum until such time as the amount of data that was being carried on the data network began to dwarf the amount of data that was being carried on the TDM network. You know, voice streams compared to data streams typically are very small bandwidth users, and so it became much cheaper just to begin carrying the voice traffic on the data network, and that was really the evolution of why voice over IP became popular. It became cheaper. When I came into this industry, PBXs were called big iron hardware, and that's because they were big and they were hardware and they had big iron shelves that they held them together with. And one of the evolutions in the industry has been the move towards software-based solutions. And you ask, well, that was a technology-enabled change. But once again, I don't think that gained momentum until such time as general-purpose computing devices became cheap enough and could run, and powerful enough, to run digital signal processing algorithms to eliminate the need for custom silicon, which required all this hardware. And then you saw an evolution. And in fact, this is about the time that Asterisk hit the scene. That's part of the reason why Asterisk and this move to general-purpose computing gained such momentum at the time that it did. And today, we see an increasing percentage of customers moving their communication solutions to the cloud. So why is that happening? Well, for some organizations, that's strictly a matter of upfront cost. It's cheaper. But for some organizations, it doesn't look like it's cheaper on the front end. But if you do a total cost of ownership, it is a shift in the way we utilize communications, which makes it an interesting evolution. It's a shift in the business model of the end user. So for most small and medium-sized businesses, it's a daunting task to install and maintain an IT infrastructure and to stay current. And for most small and medium-sized businesses, they don't want to do that, and they're not very good at it. So the ability to offload that responsibility to someone else and look at it from a total cost of ownership, not having to have that infrastructure and the ability to manage it yourself, results in a cost savings. So once again, I contend that is cost savings. So with things moving a lot faster, environment of innovation, how will things evolve going forward? And I contend that communications will move from being its own thing to not being a thing, and it will be integrated into every aspect of how we do business. It'll be integrated into CRM systems, be integrated into ERP systems, be integrated into websites, and you won't context switch between one application to another. These things will be integrated together. So if you will accept that as the premise, maybe that's going to happen, let's try to understand why that might happen. Well, if essentially all the change that has been significant, that's been driven for the last 25 years, was driven off of cost, then the question is this a lower cost way of doing business? And I contend, yes. It will move from being a thing to not being a thing. So if it promises to be a lower cost way of doing business, then the next question is about timing. Because part of anticipating how we position our companies to take advantage of changes in the market is all about timing. You can't be there too soon, because if you're there too soon, you spend a lot of money and nobody shows up. And you can't be there too late, because if you're too late, somebody else got all the customers along the way. And there are so many things going on today that are impactful, that are creating a need for us to change the way we communicate, that all these things are happening at once. So our company, the most critical conversations we have with our customers are still voice communications. Might be face-to-face, might be on a phone call, but we have so many other ways to communicate that many of them are more efficient for different types of communication needs. So the ability to integrate all of them together and utilize all of those is driving demand to support things other than voice in the way our businesses communicate. We also are being asked to support all sorts of devices, mobile devices, tablets, phablets, desktop computers, laptop computers, all need to become part of our communications infrastructure for communicating with our customers, and where we communicate is changing. It used to be that business communications happened at your desk because that's where your desk phone was. Today, it needs to happen wherever you are in all sorts of places, and as organizations, even like Digium's, have an increasingly distributed workforce, all of these things are driving the need to change the communications infrastructure. So with all of the needs to change, it will drive significant model and evolutionary changes in the way we interact with our communications products and services. However, even though we need to embrace change, that doesn't mean that changing is easy. Got a whole presentation yesterday from Bill Wignall about trying to manage change in your organization. But I also believe that regardless of where a company is in their current use of communications products and services, there is a way to advance down the path of moving toward communications as not a thing. And so if you think of organizations in terms of where they are in the adoption of technology, and if you think of laggards on one end of the scale, think of early adopters on the other end of the scale, then you could pick a few spots along the way, and there are very logical steps down this road that make sense to me, and I thought we might look at some of those steps. So, if your boss is a Luddite, you most likely have not invested in your communications infrastructure in a very long time, and you're running some old gear. And in fact, I think I'm interested to take a poll. How many of you would constitute that the communication, oh, and by the way, if you're an end user, answer these questions for your organization. But if you're a systems integrator, just answer it based upon what your typical customer looks like. How many of you would say that the communications infrastructure that you deal with every day is at least 2 decades old? Show of hands. Sorry, you don't have to put your hand up, sir. You're the only one in the room. I hate that for you. Clearly have a very current communication set here. In dealing with our customers, we find customers coming to us all the time that really have very old communications infrastructures. And so the very first step in moving forward toward a not a thing communications model is just upgrade to a current system. But in upgrading to a current system, that upgrade needs to be done toward a unified communications solution. So a UC solution will at least give you the opportunity to meet the need of the users to support multiple modes of communication and integrate them all seamlessly into one infrastructure. And if you're going to be out upgrading your system to begin with, ensure that you install a communication solution with an API, because that's going to lay a foundation for multiple steps to get you further down the road or further down the path toward communications as not a thing. So it sounds like many of you have got unified communication solutions installed in your company today. In fact, show of hands, how many of you have a UC solution infrastructure in place today? All right, so I'm going to go with that's more than half. If you're there, then what's a logical step to move further down the road for you? In fact, I would classify you guys as mildly progressive. If you're mildly progressive, then the next logical step is to be looking at all the elements of your IT infrastructure and ensure that you are selecting elements with APIs. And in most cases, manufacturers build APIs so that you can do special things with them. But in many cases, manufacturers integrate out of the box with selected market-leading products and services. So look for integrations between your unified communication solution, which you installed, and other applications. And it's very common that UC applications can be integrated with productivity suites. It will allow you to do things like drive your presence based off of your calendar, click to dial from within a document, click to dial out of vCards. It's also very common that UC solutions are integrated with CRM solutions. Lets you do things like have a screen pop show up on a salesperson's desk on an incoming communication that shows a customer record. Would allow you to do things like record calls with a customer and automatically attach it to that customer's CRM record. So I'm interested, how many of you are today using out-of-the-box integrations between your UC solution and any other applications in your business? Show of hands. All right, that got us down to maybe 15 or 20%. I would put you in the moderately progressive category. So if you're moderately progressive, how do you then take a step down the communications, not a thing path? Well, what manufacturers are going to do for you in out-of-the-box integrations are going to be limited to whatever they thought were good ideas. Most of us in running our businesses set up out of necessity some set of unique business processes to run your business, because all businesses are unique, which creates a demand to, if you want to communications enable those business processes, you got to do some of that work yourself. So, in that case, use the APIs of your UC solution to communications enable your business processes. And I'll give you what is an ultra simple example, just to show you the point. We have a customer who's a dentist. He is not a programmer, and he uses different applications to run his dentist practice, one of which is a patient record management system. And he was able to utilize the APIs into both products. So his PRM system could tell his UC system, call this customer, play this message, get them to push a button, acknowledge their appointment is coming next week, or push a different button, tell me they need to reschedule, freed up the staff to do other things, improved his efficiency, improved his productivity, was a cost-related thing, was a very simple thing for him to do. So I put that class of user maybe in the cautiously adventurous category, and I'm interested to know how many of you are utilizing APIs into your communications system to do some sort of custom communications enabling of your business processes. Show of hands. Very cool. We're down to maybe 10% or 12%. So if you're at that level, what's an appropriate next step for you? Well, if you're communications enabling your business processes using APIs into established products, you're going to be limited by whatever capability exists in the API. And at some point, you're going to run out of horsepower to address problems through an API. The next logical step there is to go write some sort of a custom application to do what it is you're trying to do. And I would suggest that the best way to write a custom communications application is to start with an open source engine like Asterisk, build something that either augments or replaces a certain element of your communications infrastructure. As an example, there's a Asterisk systems integrator. Digium is in Alabama. We have a lot of experience with what goes on in our state. The state of Alabama has a gigantic database on every student in the public school system. It wanted to communications enable its business process of notifying the parents or the guardians of certain types of events, weather events, truancy events, God forbid, active shooter events. But the requirement was, we've got a massive database, and we have to notify a lot of people in a very short period of time, not something that could be done through a traditional API. So using Asterisk, they wrote custom integrations with the database, created a system that's capable of using multiple modes of communications to communicate with the parents, and it could do 1 million communications per hour. So I suspect there are a lot of you in this room using custom Asterisk-based solutions for business, for communications enabling business processes. Show of hands, how many of you are doing that? All right, so we're down to 8% or so. So if you're there, you're clearly aggressively adventurous. What's the next step down the communications as not a thing path for you? Well, I think the next step becomes to embrace the world of web communications. Web communications is about using standard web technologies to write communications features and functions and embed them in things that have traditionally been web-oriented. Things like HTML, JavaScript. Web communications will leverage the acceptance and the popularity of WebRTC. So it's predicted that by 2019, there are going to be 6 billion devices out there that support WebRTC. Probably 1 billion of them are going to be owned by people in this room. And this is a web browser-based approach that converts a device that was never intended, well, I won't say that, a device that's not currently part of your communications infrastructure to be able to access your communications infrastructure without you having to do anything to it. Web communications supports multiple modes of communications: messaging, voice, video, screen sharing. Web communications, ooh, sorry about that. There will be a brief delay. Web communications is peer-to-peer, and as a result, the traffic that used to flow through the nation's carrier networks. It's now flowing around those carrier networks. And that makes it inherently very disruptive. We'll talk a little more about that. So if you have this web communications capability, what is it you could do to make your life more like George Jetson? I would contend you should create bridges between your web presence and your communications presence with all of your customers. You have customers coming to your website today, but they probably have to go interact with a communications product to actually talk to someone in your company. Why not build bridges between these two events? So how would you do that? Well, if you're a large enough company, you just go build this yourself. But if you don't want to go build it yourself, or you don't have the skill to go build it yourself, you can utilize the services of something called a communications platform as a service. Digium introduced a product last year called Respoke. The guys from Tropo are here. The guys from Twilio are here. All of these are under the category of communications platform as a service, and they're intended to do the heavy lifting so that web developers don't have to know a lot about communications to be able to communications enable things like websites and web apps. So let's take an example of what you might do. This system is intended to show that you have a unified communication solutions with an API in your business, because you bought the right one or upgraded to the right one, right? You've got a web server that runs your company's website. And in this example, we have somebody named Alice, all right, that is on your website with a WebRTC-enabled device, let's say an Android tablet, who's browsing, looking for something to buy, and decides she sees a button on the website that says, press here to talk to a salesperson. Well, she does that, and through the services of a communications pass, it creates a communications link between Alice and your unified communication solution. Because there's an API, the context of where she was on the website is passed through the API to the UC solution, and that call is then created and delivered into the right call queue so that the salesperson who would normally be processing calls coming in from the PSTN or wherever is now talking to this person just as if she'd come through the communications network. So how many of you today have bridges built between your web presence and your communications infrastructure? All right, we're down to 3% or 3.5%. So if that's where you are, then you're currently very aggressive in your communications infrastructure. And you're like, bring it. What's the next step for me? Well, at that point, you're to the spot where you really need to build it. But using these technologies, you can build things that haven't been built before, and that's part of the beauty of web communications. You can think of it the same way that Amazon thought about it. So Amazon has a product called the Kindle Fire. It's got a camera. It reportedly runs WebRTC. And they created a button called the Mayday button. And if you're a customer of the Kindle Fire and you have a question, you press the Mayday button, and somebody shows up on the screen to talk to you about your problem. That's a WebRTC-enabled video conference, video chat. And Amazon now reports that over 70% of all support activity on the Kindle Fire comes through that button. Envision maybe a customer portal on your website where a customer can come and have some questions, and the most efficient way to get that question answered is through chat. So they begin a chat session with someone in your company. But the chat session quickly evolves into something that you need to talk to this person to get more context. You can promote that chat into a voice call, which you then determine, gosh, if I could just show this person this stuff, I could answer their question more quickly. It gets promoted into a video session that's screen sharing. All of those things are possible if you utilize web communications in conjunction with your existing unified communications solution. So, in conclusion, I believe that what didn't change a lot for 100 years is about to change rapidly, and that's the model by which communications is utilized in all of our products. And the way we interact with our customers will change, and it will have very direct effects. You'll be able to go to websites and talk to people, go to websites and have video chats with people. It'll have very indirect effects. If all the traffic that's created through this change flows around the traditional carrier network, that's very disruptive. It'll have very indirect consequences associated with those particular vendors and markets. And for most organizations, this is going to be a multi-year, multi-step journey, but possibly in the future, we will reach a spot where communications will no longer be its own thing. All right, with that, I will open the floor for any questions that you might have. I don't see well, but David, do we have time for a couple of questions? All right. All right.
Introducing Steve Davis, all the way from South Africa.
Probably with a stupid question, but forgive me. So, I mean, I noticed in my work actually that one of the challenges with doing voice over IP communications and all the rest of it, in a way, is actually that traditional telephony isn't actually seen as a technology at all. It's just seen as a kind of a device that you don't even think about or notice. And our solutions, if they look like desktop traditional telephone systems, people see them the same, and they forget about the name of the provider who provided it for them. When they glitch, then they suddenly remember who you are. So credit to AT&T and the traditional stuff, it works all the time. And so in that way, technically, it wasn't a thing either.
All right, point made.
That's a question, yeah.
That was a question? I thought it was a comment.
Since I'm feeling a bit embarrassed. I guess the question is, do you agree? We have to make these new solutions really slick, invisible, smooth. We don't want to be fiddling to try and plug our VGA into our DVI. It's got to really, really work well, and that's a tall, big challenge.
Yeah, so I think the concern is the traditional public switch telephone network set a 5 nines gold-plated standard for reliability, and voice over IP maybe hasn't lived up to that, which has lots of reasons of why that might be the case. I guess I believe that in figuring out if that is a problem or not a problem, clearly if you could just fix that, you would do so. But the evolution of mobile devices and the lack of functionality and high-quality service in mobile devices has served to lower the expectations on the part of the users, such that if it'll work better than your mobile device, you've made an improvement, because mobile devices are a lot of what we're using for communications today. In fact, I saw a survey that was published yesterday of business users with regard to the device they use to interact. And it said that today, just over 50% still prefer a desk phone for a business communications interaction. 40% or so are on mobile devices or some sort of other mobile platform, and 10% are exclusively soft phone. So if you'd done that poll 10 years ago, it probably would have been 95% of users preferring a desktop. And so what you can see is the trend of where that's headed. And I think the mobile device, if the mobile device becomes the primary way we conduct our business communications, you might set a standard for your business communications level that's higher than what you're willing to accept for your personal communications. And in order for us to get there, you have to solve the problem of making it as reliable and the call quality as good as what you've been traditionally accustomed to in the PSTN. Alistair. Oh, sorry.
From what I have been seeing these days, most of the future goes around developing solutions. But I see still the training, Digium training, going on preparing the people to get to the dial tone and nothing more. And still the presential course that requires you to travel to Dubai, Huntsville, or why, if that's the direction, the training is not most focused on development and more online than presential?
Was that question specifically around Asterisk, or was it just a training question in general?
Related to Digium as a company.
Oh, yeah, so the question was, we still do training for Asterisk. We do a lot of it in person. We don't do enough of it online. So we do some of the introductory courses online. Our experience has been we can deliver a much better solution for the person who's going through the training in a face-to-face, hands-on training environment. But it is true that we believe we have to move more of that training to be online, and it's one of our initiatives. But the reason it's been the way it's been is we think there's a lot of value in the actual hands-on, face-to-face interaction of the people in the room. And that explains why it's the way it has been in the past, but recognize it needs to be more, there needs to be more online content available for Asterisk training. Agree with that point.
Okay, Danny,
James.
you touched on the importance of mobile devices going forward and how things are moving that way. How do you think that is going to affect the products that Digium are going to be pushing out in the next 3 or 4 years? How are you going to achieve a mobile slant?
All right, well, it's, there's maybe 2 questions to that. There's Asterisk and there's Digium Commercial Solutions. And we really try hard to balance the need of the community for what gets done in Asterisk versus the commercial interest of Digium when we're trying to develop products and services. But one of the most pressing market trends that we're trying to react to on the Digium side is the concept that users might eventually completely transition away from a desk phone. And so today we do things like allow you to converge multiple devices into one phone number. So you can have a desktop device and a mobile phone converged onto the same number so that you could use your desktop device or your mobile device, and it's an extension off of your company's PBX, and that's enabled. We're actually looking at other products and services for futures that would anticipate that the mobile device is the exclusive device that a person is using. And so I think you'll see commercial products from Digium at some point in the future based upon that concept, because I truly believe that's what's going to happen.
Thanks.
Alistair.
The last decade has seen a great rise in proprietary walled garden services like Skype and WhatsApp and Line and so on that really fragment the communications industry. How do we reverse this trend?
You know, I don't, and I assume everyone heard that question. I don't know that I have the right answer for that, but what I do know is if you look back historically at the evolution of text messaging, in the early days of text messaging, there were walled gardens. It was all about which carrier's network you were on, and it wasn't until the spot where you could maintain federation between all of these different walled gardens that you really saw the momentum of that service accelerate. I would contend that we need a federation process for all of these things together, and if you could federate all this, that would be the thing that would remove the walled gardens. So I anticipate that because the free market normally drives things to the right ultimate destination, that a federated implementation is where things will land, but I can't tell you when or what events might promote that to happen faster.
It might be worth mentioning at this stage that there is a talk by matrix.org at some stage today, which attempts to answer some of those questions.
Okay?
Okay.
So you're talking about communication not being a thing and these kind of like standard APIs and integrations, but our business, we develop custom solutions for our end users, and not everyone uses things like Salesforce.com, and even if they do use Salesforce.com, they have idiosyncrasies with their business. So with this always constant need for customizations, how do you see this flowing in with the being not a thing?
Yeah, so I think communications as not a thing is simply a way to describe that communications gets integrated into all these other apps. So really and truly, the way that gets implemented, there might be a communications application that's talking through APIs, and you're just interacting through a CRM system, but it's really making calls back into a communication solution. So from the way it's implemented, it's a thing, but from the way the customer perceives it, it's not its own dedicated thing. And I think it puts, it creates opportunity for systems integrators to go in and be the partner that keeps the business processes, as the business processes change, you keep the integrations current with business processes, because that is a way that you wind up getting connected to your customer in a way that they can't easily get rid of you, because now you are the key that's creating the communications enablement of business processes, even though the way that works is through API integrations between standalone applications.
Okay, there's one more there. We'll make this one our last public one. You'll still be around to take some questions privately, Danny, right?
When you were talking about communications not being a thing, that's actually the strategy of my company. We don't consider ourselves an Asterisk or a communications company. We're a content and services company, and Asterisk is just the way we reach our customers. However, my customers are all consumers. We're not enterprise related. my question is there anything in Digium's roadmap where you will be addressing the consumer market directly instead of the enterprise market? Will Digium at some point, for example, release a competitor to iMessage, for example?
Yeah, I don't ever say never, but Digium's core business is delivering communications products and services to a particular segment of the industry, which is small and medium-sized businesses. The way we reach those businesses is a go-to-market strategy we've invested a lot of money in, and at this point, we don't have roadmap plans to go after a consumer-oriented customer. We might build products on the low end of the SMB that would somehow appeal to consumers, but at this point, we have no plans to go build consumer-oriented level products.
Hello, hello. Are we on? Okay, yeah. Will you be around to take some more questions
Sure.
privately, Danny?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, let's just say thank you very much to Danny.
Thanks, David.
And I do have a couple of other notices. I think the gentleman wanted to come back on the training. I just did want to point out that although, just to complement Danny's answer, we do, of course, need to do more online training. The current training is always evolving, but it does currently include AGI, AMI, Funko DBC, lots of developer-related stuff, and, of course, we'll include the ARI stuff. Now, we've got a couple of different notices here that lunch is not going to be in here today. Lunch is going to be in Pacific Ballroom number 3. If you're wondering where that is, it's right next door to where the Free PBX World track is. So find your way to Free PBX World. After that is the lunch. And also, we're back in here at 3:10 for Matt Jordan's wrap-up this afternoon. And I just wanted to finish off by thanking a few people. I wanted to thank TMC. They're the folk that you've seen behind the registration desk, and you might have seen lovely Natasha wandering about with her blonde hair. So let's give them a little round of applause. But there's also 2 other people to identify, and that is blonde lady Julie. Where's Julie? She was in here. There she is. There's Julie. And green-shirted Mikey Sissel. You better stand up, Mikey, just for a minute. And these are the people that have made AstriCon what it is. They're the people that came and scouted out the hotel. It was Mikey that did the graphics. And he made those signs so nice that people wanted to peel them off the sidewalk and take them away. So anyway, and lastly, thank you all very much for coming along. And we'll see you at the wrap-up this evening. Thank you.